Hey everyone, it's Presley at ActOutGames.com here, and today we're doing a Presley's perspective on the Republican debate. So we've done a Democratic debate. There'll be a link in the doobly-doo and on the end card, so you guys can check that out. And now we're going to do a Republican debate.
Okay, yeah, so like Presley said, we did the Democratic debate a while back, like a month ago or so, maybe a little more even, and had a pretty good conversation about it, I thought. So we're going to do the same thing here with the Republican debate. We're going to watch about 30-minute chunks and then come downstairs and talk real quick a little bit about what's happened in that 30 minutes, see what Presley thinks about what people are saying and who she thinks wins the debate, and the chunks of the debate that we're talking through, right? This time we're talking a little bit more, her and I are having some conversation, a little bit more conversations about what's going on kind of in the world and what they're talking about and what the philosophies are. The Democratic debate was a lot more just cold. We just watched it and let her kind of figure out what she thought was going on. But this time we're having some more side conversations about it, more informational and not trying to kind of skew you one way or the other. Okay, so we started off with the introductions. They introduced all the candidates, and you knew who one of the candidates was.
I actually
who was that?
I knew who Donald Trump was because everyone ever talks about him. And now that I think about it, I have heard the name Jeb Bush before.
Have you? Good. Yeah.
Yes.
So we had a President Bush. We had two President Bushes before.
Yes.
His brother was one of them, and his dad was another one. His dad and his brother have both been presidents since I've been alive, right? So yeah, okay, it's cool that you've heard of Jeb Bush, and obviously you've heard of Trump, right?
Yes.
And yes, you're right. That he's the only one people tend to talk about, and he's in the front right now. He's leading all the polls and stuff. So currently he's the inside favorite to actually be the Republican nominee, right? But yeah, I thought that was interesting that he's the one person that you've heard of. I thought that was probably true. Not surprised by that. Any big takeaways that you want to kind of jump out with the first half hour or so of the debate?
I mean, we do have some things we wanted to talk about, but there's nothing specific that I just wanted to start off with.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about, during the introductions, I made some notes here. We noticed a little bit the idea of like isolationism versus sort of a more open approach. So we kind of talked about the Syrian refugee crisis we had to talk about, right? That was one of the things we talked about. And whether, do you maintain sort of open borders, not letting people in, like the Syrian refugees, like and having those people come in, even if there is a risk that ISIS may slip somebody in there and something bad may happen in the country, or do you lock that away and keep out all of the good people because you don't want one or two bad people to come in? And I think it's a legitimate question, and it's a serious debate topic. But what did you think about that when we were talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of oddly stuck in between each side because I don't want anything bad to happen to anyone here, but I don't want anything bad to happen to like 10,000 refugees. Like, I'd rather have the refugees come in at the risk of a few people coming in, like if I had to choose. But there's probably some sort of solution in between where we can prevent more of the people that could hurt us, and like there could probably be some sort of thing
like screening people that come in. And I think you should certainly screen people and try and be careful who you let into the country, right? But I think it's impossible to always identify people who have bad intentions. I think you're never going to know everybody that's going to be trying to think of something bad. And I think you're right. I mean, I think you do have to still be helpful and still let people in and take some risks that something may happen. Like, I don't know, I kind of agree with that, right? Yeah. The other thing is, like, Trump's big thing about no Muslims should be allowed into the country. Like, that's such a weird thing to me. Not only because the obvious reasons, but, like, the other, like, how do you know who's a Muslim and who's not a Muslim? Yeah. Like, what is the test that you have in place to determine whether somebody should be let in or not? You just ask them? Is it, like, self-identification? Like, we were joking the other day, like, you got a terrorist that's coming into the country, and he's plotting to like set up a bomb and kill hundreds of Americans, and he gets to the border and they're like, "Are you a Muslim?" And he's like, "Oh, you got me." like that guy's not gonna lie about, like, it just seems like such a weird thing a rule to have in place to let people come to the country. And then the other point of there are lots of countries that are Muslim countries, and most of the people killed by ISIS have been Muslims. Like, so it's not like, they're all buddy with ISIS, but they're like huge countries and people I work with, and like, I don't know, I know a lot of Muslims, and so that's kind of an offensive kind of stance to me.
Yeah. Even more so to people who actually follow that religion.
Of course it is. Yeah, of course it is. Okay, so we talked about, Chris Christie in his opening statements did something that was very sort of patriarchal. Do you remember what he said?
Well, he said, like, quite a few things that bothered me. Like, not quite a few things. He said one thing that bothered me a lot.
Right.
Which is, first of all, he said that the men would be working and not the women. And then he said that the men would be working and not the women. And specifying that the couples are men and women, as well as that the men would be working. And then specifying that it would specifically be that that there are no genders other than women and men, and like that. Oh, that was just one
That's
thing.
a lot
that
to
just
ask Chris Christie to say in a Republican debate to talk about
the parents,
non-binary.
The parents.
But just like, I think that he laid out this little scenario of the kids going to school in California canceled, Los Angeles canceled class today because of a bomb threat and stuff. But he said like the moms. It's going to be scary to the moms who are taking their kids to the bus and picking them up after school and taking care of them, and to the dads that are going to work that day. Like, he was very clear that, like, the dads are working. It was very much like the Gina Davis Institute video that you did, right?
Yeah.
That, like, representation of, in his little scenario that he gave, who has a job, the man of the family has a job and the woman doesn't. Like, that was very patriarchal. I thought it was kind of rough there. You mentioned something you didn't like about people were sort of conflating Islam and ISIS together. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, like there were people that were just like everyone, like every person. Apparently Islam is ISIS, and like saying we have to stop Islam instead of we have to stop ISIS. Those are very, very different things.
They are. Yeah, the language can be a little rough, certainly. So just so we don't go like hugely long on this, I want to wrap up a couple of quick thoughts that I had here. One, I'm just going to throw out, this is personal experience that I want to throw out there. Like, Ben Carson seems like such an interesting candidate to me. And he didn't talk a lot during this thing. I'm sure he'll talk more. But like I was going to say, like from personal experience in various ways, like through Nani and through some other things too, like I've learned that doctors like tend to be, and this is stereotypical, right? But they tend to be really good at being a doctor and pretty bad at almost everything else. And it tends to be the better they are at being a doctor, the worse they are at other things that they do. And so like I think he's probably a brilliant neurosurgeon, and he's done some really amazing things, and he talks about being a neurosurgeon an awful lot in the debate and stuff. But like that scares me a little bit, because a lot of the doctors I know that are really, really good doctors are really pretty bad at just about everything else in the world. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That's what I think of every time that I see him.
I like how your notes say doctors, bad
stuff. Right? That's my note to myself. So the other thing I thought was really interesting was they started talking about technology, and you can see that they don't know a lot about technology. It always kind of bugs me when they do this. So they're talking about encryption specifically, right? And they want like companies to provide a back door to the government into all of their encryption, so that if like a terrorist sends an encrypted message and the government gets a subpoena to go read that message, they can go in the back door and decrypt that message without having the key to decrypt it, right? There's a secret key that can decrypt it, and that's a horrible idea on so many levels, right? On one level, that key will get out. Like if you make a back door into a system, people are going to find it, and encryption's just going to be gone at that point, right? And the other is that like people can make their own encryption systems. It's not just Apple's encryption system or Google's encryption system or something like that. People make their own encryption systems that are perfectly strong and safe. And so like they always complain about, you don't want, if there's a problem that these bad guys are doing something, you don't want to punish the law-abiding people and the good people for doing it. Whereas this law that they're talking about would sort of do exactly that, because only the people who use their regular encryption on their phones or something like that would be punished by that, because people could then read their private messages. Right? Whereas the terrorist who, like ISIS seems to be pretty technologically sophisticated, can use some point-to-point encryption technology that that law wouldn't apply to, right? So it's just people that don't really understand the technology that are talking about really cool sound bites, I think.
Yeah, and this kind of brings me to something that's been talked a lot about, at least by people that I have been paying attention to. Like they have talked a lot about how lots of people try and make younger people not really try and make younger people look bad, but they don't some older people don't understand technology. Yeah. And they try and make it look like kids don't understand what they had. They don't understand books, and they don't understand things like that. Like what?
Yeah, that's all. That conversation has existed through all of time. Like parents think their kids don't understand stuff, and they're the worst generation ever. And kids think their parents are too old-fashioned and don't understand all that. Like that's just always the way it's always going to be, right? But even there was a Supreme Court case not long ago about whether the police could decrypt an iPhone, make a guy decrypt his iPhone, and listening to them talk about encryption and technology, it hurt me to hear them talk, because they had no idea what they were talking about. And it's like, this is the Supreme Court, like the ultimate judiciary body in the country, that are making decisions that in fact impact us all, and they have no idea what they're talking about. And and it's clearly in this case that was kind of the same too. Yeah. So that's kind of what I got out of the first half hour. It's pretty early. Anything else you want to add before we go do another half hour?
I mean, there are a couple of...
Who do you think won the first half hour? Who did you like?
I don't know, honestly.
Can you say anyone who said anything that you thought you really liked? You said you didn't like some of the stuff Chris Christie said. Was there somebody that you thought that guy said some stuff that made sense?
I mean, there's a lot of jumbled together things that come from different people that form what I think. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint who those people are. Okay. I mean, basically...
Maybe next time we can try and pinpoint a person for the next block.
Basically, pretty much, we should not keep everyone out of the country. We should not stop... we should not get rid of everyone. It's just a general thing.
Yeah, right.
That I agree with. We should not just try and get rid of all the Muslims for some reason. That aren't American.
Right. So that was Trump's. That's definitely Trump's position. So yeah, I agree. He was definitely out there. Yeah, I'll say, and so I'm trying to limit my comments here mostly to what happened in this debate, right? And not think about all the other stuff that has happened. So just on watching people on the stage, I thought Jeb Bush did a pretty good job. He didn't talk a ton, but I thought I really liked what he said. And it pains me to say this, but I thought Ted Cruz did a really good job. I agreed with some of the stuff that Ted Cruz had to say too. And I would not have thought going into this debate that I would sit here and say I thought Ted Cruz did a good job. But I kind of liked some of the stuff he had to say. So those were my favorites from the first block. So this time we'll watch a little bit more and maybe catch a name from you to see who you think's doing good. All right? Let's go watch some more.
All right, so we just finished block 2, and now we're going to talk about the stuff that happened.
So a lot of the same stuff, right? So I think it's maybe a little bit shorter block. They're still talking mostly about ISIS and how to, because this debate is focused on national security, like we said. Each of the debate kind of talks about different things. So they're not really talking about social issues in America or the economy in America. They're talking about national defense. And right now, national defense is sort of about the fight with ISIS, right? And so a couple of big things came up that I at least want to touch on real quick. First, They talked about, right after we went back upstairs, they talked about Donald Trump saying that we should kill the families of the terrorists.
Why?
Because it would make the terrorists don't care about their own lives, but they do care about their families, and so if we kill their families, then it would make them think twice about being terrorists.
Wouldn't that be the opposite effect? They would want, wouldn't they want revenge at this point?
Certainly a reasonable argument, I think, right? And also, that would kind of make you a terrorist.
Yeah.
Right? That's the other thing to think about, is that you're killing innocent people to further your cause, right? And that's sort of the definition of terrorism, right? Yeah. I don't have words for that position. I just thought it was, They brought it up and they talked about it, though. Yeah. So, it's just not a good idea. And then the other big thing that I wanted to talk about that they just kind of started talking about just now, Ted Cruz. Again, I liked what Ted Cruz had to say. But foreign policy, I like Ted Cruz. We were talking about this idea of you have these dictators that are in place, particularly in the Middle East, right? So you had Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein, and now Bashar al-Assad, and you had Mubarak in Egypt. So you had all of these dictators in place, and they were really horrible people for the most part, right? They were doing terrible things to their people. But at the same time, they were kind of ruling their countries with an iron fist, right? And so the terrorist-like elements that were in their country, they were keeping them in check and keeping them in jail, and these things kind of weren't happening at the time, right? And so there's an argument that when we went over there and we toppled these dictators and we took them out of power, that suddenly that freed these evil forces within those countries to come to power. And now we haven't, Assad is still in power, right? But all of the other ones we've taken down, and that all of those countries are worse off. And ISIS has grown up, and the Muslim Brotherhood is running Egypt, and there are terrorists. Libya is a terrorist breeding ground, right? And that we're not better off safety, and those countries aren't even better off being rid of those people, right? Even though they were terrible people and terrible dictators, that it was a mistake to topple them, and that the government, the countries weren't ready to sort of run themselves and do those kinds of things, right? And this is a really complicated topic, right? It's hard to say, were we safer when those people were in power, like Ted Cruz said? I think there's an argument that we were, right? That we as America was, but those countries were in terrible shape because of the way that they were treating the thing. But the countries are in maybe even worse shape now because there's chaos over there in a lot of those cases and a lot of things that are going on over there. And so, do we have an obligation as a country to sort of spread democracy and get rid of dictators just sort of on principle? Or if those dictators are keeping us safe, do we leave them in power? Or we don't know what's going to happen when we topple them, and so even though we don't like they're there, if we don't know what's going to happen after the fact, do we leave them in place because it could be worse after they get out? So what do you think about that, like, just ideal? And that's I understand this is a really complicated thing, right? This is one of the biggest questions that you sort of face, and like there are people that are running for president are struggling to answer these kinds of questions, so it's tough to ask it of a 10-year-old, but I'm curious what your thoughts are about that idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yet again, I'm in some weird, like, I can't really quite pinpoint which one I would have to choose. Like, if we did, like, topple someone that was treating their country horribly, but then there was a new person that took control that was still horrible,
or worse,
then that would be, like, that would put the country and us in worse shape.
That's true.
But, like, and there's not really there's no good way, because, like, if we tried to kind of help them and say, oh, this person would be a good leader, then it would almost seem like we were a dictatorship and we were telling them what to do.
That's exactly right. That's very insightful. So that's what they call that nation building. So if you listen to the debates and the political conversations that are going on, and when you hear them talk about nation building, that's what they're talking about, is that after you topple the dictator, we're helping them build their country back up, and we're spending billions and billions of our tax dollars, and we're sending our troops over there and our people over there to help them rebuild their country. And number one, it's ridiculously expensive for us to do, and number two, we're telling someone how to run their country, and those people typically aren't going to like that. That's a really good point, right? And so, I don't have a good answer here, but I like that you're sort of being exposed to this, because this is a huge topic of conversation. You're going to hear it in the debates, you're going to hear it, and how do we run the country? And it's a good example of there's not like a really clear answer. There's not like an obviously we should do this, or obviously we should do this, and that guy's wrong and we should do it this way. These are really hard questions, and so you just kind of have to listen to what the people have to say and try and decide if they're being reasonable about it. And one of the ways that I decide that a candidate is being reasonable about this kind of question is admitting that it's a hard question. Like, anytime a candidate says, oh, we should obviously do this, this is clearly the answer for this problem, I don't trust them, because there is no obvious answer to this. And this is not a place where I want somebody to be like totally authoritative, assertive, and say, no, this is exactly what we should do, and this is the right thing, and things will be better if we do this. Because you don't know that. Right? It's better for you to say, look, this is really hard, and we're going to try our best, and it's case by case. Maybe it's better to take out Gaddafi, but you shouldn't take out somebody else, Assad, right? Maybe leave Assad. It's just a case by case kind of thing, and it's a tough battle. I don't know. The other thing I wanted to bring up was this idea of destroying the caliphate. I can't remember who brought it up this time, but it's an interesting idea that the caliphate for ISIS is like they're building this country. And so they're not recognizing these national borders like Syria and Iraq and these other countries. They're taking territory from all of those places and building sort of their own country, right? It's called the caliphate. And so it's a religious country, basically. And so they believe, at least in theory, they believe that that country is sort of inspired, like God is on their side and is giving them this country, and they're taking these things over. And one of the reasons that they're drawing people to their cause is because they're winning, and they're small. There's this small little group of people that have taken over this huge area of territory, and they're holding it, and they're winning these battles. And so it seems like, hey, maybe God is on their side. And so people that are kind of on the fence are saying we should go join them. And so people are starting to say, no, we should focus on destroying the caliphate, like taking land back away from them and breaking the caliphate up, and so that they can no longer sort of make this argument that God is on their side, and like it's a divine thing that they've taken over this territory. If they start losing battles and we start taking cities and territory back from them, they're less likely to be able to attract fighters, because it doesn't look as divine as it did when they were just storming through the countryside and taking over countries and not losing battles. I think it's a really insightful approach that people are starting to take a little bit. It's a thoughtful, so the people who have said that, I know Lindsey Graham said it in the earlier debate that we didn't watch together.
Yeah.
And then someone, at least somebody said it tonight. I didn't write down who said it, but I think that's an insightful approach to the problem. And again, a problem without a lot of easy answers.
Yeah.
This whole national security thing is really complicated. Did you notice anyone this time that you thought particularly did a good job or a bad job? I think we know Trump did a bad job with that whole kill families thing. That was pretty bad. But aside from that, did anything jump out at you this round?
Yet again, there's like there's not really a specific person. Like, I'm not really going to latch onto a specific person's opinion and like assume that's right. Like, even if I agree with them on some things, I probably won't agree with them on other things.
Yeah. Was there any point that anyone made that you thought was particularly, like, it kind of stood out and you thought, oh, that's really cool, I like that was said, even if you don't remember who said it?
I mean, like, not that much this time. I mean, like, in the last block, there were a couple, like, small things that I agreed with, but, like, those weren't, like, super big things that were, like, even really that relevant.
Yeah, like, this is all really complicated stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard. This is harder for you to grok, I think, than even the Democratic debate that we watched that was probably more about, U.S. policy and social issues that are easier for you to understand. Like, these national defense things, like I said, are really complicated. So I'm not at all surprised that it's harder for you to latch onto a point and understand exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, at one point, Presley, we were watching, this is really funny, we were watching the thing, and so they're talking about whether we need to put boots on the ground in Syria or whether the airstrike or stuff, and Presley's like, what are boots?
Why do we need to put boots?
Why are they talking about boots? I don't understand why this whole debate's about boots. What's going on here? And so I kind of had to explain the idea of putting, like, troops on the ground versus airstrikes, and that if you put troops on the ground, that some of those troops are going to be killed, and so American soldiers will die if you put boots on the ground, and so people are kind of hesitant to do that, even if it's necessary to do it and stuff.
Yeah.
And so this is it's a brilliant thing for us to kind of have this conversation and for you to learn more about it and kind of see what's going on. So I expect you less to be sort of engaged and participatory in some of these conversations, but I'm really glad that you're learning about it. That's the whole point. All right, next block.
Alright, so we just actually finished it.
Yep.
I wasn't expecting to finish it. I was expecting it to take a while, but it was actually, we were doing it in 45 minutes.
That's right.
I was kind of expecting, I was like,
We thought it was going to be 4,
30.
but it was really just 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, this was the last block, and it was more kind of the same, but we'll kind of wrap up a couple of things here.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say, what did we notice about Chris Christie?
We kind of noticed about
Whenever he was giving an answer?
He always said something about Obama, Hillary Clinton, or both.
Yeah, so he
finally said something without them in it at the very end.
His closing statement, we were both like, is he going to talk about Hillary? But he totally didn't mention her in the last thing. But that was the only thing that we saw him do. But it's kind of telling when you watch a candidate, if they're always talking about what somebody else is doing wrong rather than what they would do right.
Yeah.
There's kind of a red flag for me there. Like, whenever you're attacking someone else rather than talking about yourself and what's good about you, I always kind of think that's a problem. Yeah. So that was definitely Christie's MO all night.
Yeah.
There was a lot of fighting. It made me think about sort of the YouTube, like, if on YouTube, not fighting on YouTube, but if on YouTube, like, you want to grow your channel and you want to do cool things, a lot of times you'll try and do collabs with bigger channels and kind of get some of their viewers and kind of share some viewership around. And we do subscriber shout outs to try and help people out. And we've done collabs with Audrey and people to try and help us out. And we kind of like them.
Yeah.
Like you'll see in these debates that some of the people who aren't doing really well will kind of pick a fight with someone who is doing really well just to kind of get their name associated with them. So that's like the Republican debate collab form of a collab. Is to just fight, yell at each other for a few minutes. I thought that was kind of funny. And then so I would say Ben Carson didn't really do anything to change my opinion tonight for the most part. But I did want to say, to be fair, I think that it's probably true in almost all professions, right? Like, the better you are in your profession, the worse you are in other things, because you've dedicated so much of your time to learning to do that one thing really well. So it's probably not something that's particularly unique to doctors. It's just that doctors take a lot of time and a lot of study and a lot of work to do what they do. But people who are at the top of their field in just about anything else, even like a lot of CEOs I know and like very senior executives that I've worked with, And people that I've dealt with that are kind of at the top of their game, especially in really hard to get into places, they certainly show that same trait. They've spent so much time and dedication on that one thing that the other parts of their lives tend to suffer.
Yeah, and a lot of people actually haven't heard the full thing of a jack of all trades, which is really strange. I was
going to say that. Go ahead.
A jack of all trades, master of one.
Master of none.
Master of none, but better than a master of one.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly, yeah. And I don't even know if that's really the whole thing, but it totally makes sense.
It makes sense.
Right. It's better to be a jack of all trades than a master of one.
Yes.
Because if you master one thing, you're probably really bad at a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read the same thing you read probably. It's just kind of going around right now.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not sure that's true or not, but it totally makes sense.
It makes sense.
And it fits well with what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to bring up, you brought up, we will kind of pause for a second, and you had a really great, I thought, comment that I thought I wanted you to share before we wrap up here.
So it's on, it was pretty much on, I can't remember what it's called.
We're talking about the nation building stuff.
Yeah, that. I knew that it was green, but I couldn't remember. It's
Why
green.
Is it green?
Because it is.
Okay, yeah, let's synesthesia.
That,
okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
Anyway, I liked, this is really rare for me to say, but I'm going to go back on the Roman Empire. And it's rare because I don't really talk about the Roman Empire that much, and I don't really like them because they couldn't come up with their own pantheon, and they just kind of stole the Greeks, and I'm like, why?
Okay, fair enough.
So, in the Roman pantheon,
Empire. Not the pantheon.
Roman pantheon.
The empire.
The empire.
Yeah.
In the Roman Empire, kind of towards the end of the Roman Empire itself, the Roman Empire got too big, and it started spreading out too much, and it got split in half. And then one half of it just completely vanished, and then the other half turned into this completely other thing. So it kind of vanished because it got too big. And that's kind of what would happen if we kind of went around and we tried spreading exactly what we are doing to other nations and other countries. And that would just make them America with a different leader. And that's just the point of a country, is to have their own way of doing things. And their own leaders and stuff like that. Well, if Rome started getting split up, and that was really bad for it. So if we try and force what we're doing onto other countries, then it's going to ruin us.
And so number one, that's brilliant. This has been, it's been a really hard debate for you because of the topics that they've been covering and stuff like that, but that's brilliant. It's fantastic. I'm very proud of you. But so what was the essence? Boil all that down into sort of the one crystal clear statement you gave kind of at the very end. Do you remember?
Not specifically, but
what does it mean we need to do?
It means that we kind of need, well, at least to me, we need to. I can't.
Yeah, when we're talking about we're looking at the Roman Empire as an example of.
We need to go back and look at history and see what they did right, what they did wrong, what caused this bad, extremely horrible and tragic event to happen, and know not to do that again.
Right.
Because one of the biggest faults that people have ever done, humans have ever done in the history, have not been, in history, they haven't looked at their history.
Yeah.
They hadn't paid attention to what happened.
Right.
And they repeated themselves and caused more and more bad stuff to start happening.
Yeah, brilliant, Presley. People need to be students of history. I think John Green would probably totally agree with that position, right? And not just, you tied it back to the Roman Empire, right? But you could look at, I was saying, look at what happened in Iraq when we took Saddam Hussein down, or look what happened in Libya when we got rid of Gaddafi. You can look at these things that have happened, even in relatively recent history, and see what the outcome of those things have been, and what worked and what didn't work, and use that to guide your path forward, right? Yeah. And you can also look at these things just cycle, and they just happen over and over again. But I think that is the best thought of the day, by far. I'm really proud of you. That's a crystal clear kind of way to look at this.
Thanks.
And you can see people that don't and see people that do, and you should respect people that do. And people who draw those analogies and the debate talk about, well, when we did this and this happened and we did this and this happened, they're clearly reflecting on history. And they may be picking and choosing history that matches what they want to do, but at least they're looking at history. Yeah, right. I agree. I thought that was a wonderful statement. I'm very proud of you. Yeah, no worries. Cool. So that's a Republican debate on national security, right? Next year, there's no more debates for the rest of the year. Next year, probably the field gets narrowed down a little bit. We may watch a couple more that are a little more relevant that you can probably keep up with a little bit better and give some more commentary. But we'd love to hear what you guys think. So I Again, as much as I hate to say it, I thought Ted Cruz won the debate for me. If I just look at what happened in the debate that we watched tonight, I thought he had the better positions. You?
Like, the person that said the most things that I think I agreed with, like, I don't even know if he said most of these things, but I think he did. I'm pretty sure he said these things is Jeb Bush. I think he was the kind of person that said the most things that I agreed with.
Okay, you like Jeb Bush best?
Yeah,
I can see that.
I think he said.
He did some good. In the first block, I thought Jeb Bush and Cruz did really great. I thought Cruz did good for most of the rest of it, and I didn't like as much of Bush's stuff, or I didn't notice as much of Bush's stuff. And then the last block, I thought Rand Paul did some really good stuff. And I thought, going into it, I would have thought I would like Rand Paul because I'm more libertarian, personally, which we'll talk about more what that means later. But yeah, I didn't think he did. He didn't impress me tonight. So I was going for Cruz. You went for Bush.
Yeah.
And then we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
You still think you liked Bernie better in the debate that we watched with him?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. I think that's it.
Yeah.
You want to sign us off?
So yeah, thank you for watching, and it's my bye.
Bye, guys.